very welcome to the Firm and Fast Golf Podcast. I'm your host, Shane Derby. Today we're very pleased to welcome the award-winning golf historian and writer Roger McStravick to the show to explore the formative days of modern golf and the influence that these early pioneers had both on the growth of the game in Scotland and farther afield. I've always been interested in history. However, through a deepening of my interest in golf architecture, I've also been recently consumed with the history and development of the game of golf. To understand golf now, it is instructive to understand how it was in the past, how it developed, who was responsible for this development, while also pondering why it developed in certain directions and at certain times. Had Leith Links in Edinburgh not had money troubles, then conceivably the home of golf could have been in Edinburgh. Had the confluence of Allan Robertson, Hugh Lyon Playfair, and both old and young Tom not happened, then I might be speaking from a completely different script. Today we explore these topics with Roger, and many more. We hope you enjoy our chat. Hi Roger, you're very welcome to the Firm and Fast Golf Podcast. How is all in St. Andrews?
Yeah, glorious. It's a beautiful day, and St. Andrews has been beautiful for the last couple of days. So yeah, the course is looking fantastic, and the town is beginning to buzz again with people coming back. This is a good time of year. The students are still here, and the golfers are beginning to arrive. So yeah, so the town, I love it when the town's sort of jumping and buzzing, and every coffee shop's filled with students studying, and it's just St. Andrews at its best. Really.
We first spoke many years ago when you worked for Firm in St. Andrews and I worked with Open Fairways in Belfast. So it's great to speak with you again. Since those marketing and PR days, you've moved on to be an award-winning golf writer. Perhaps you might give us an introduction to Roger McStravick from Lurgan, County Armagh, Northern Ireland, how you got bitten by the golf bug, and more pertinently, how you started to write about it.
From Lurgan, Northern Ireland, which was an amazing place to grow up in the 1970s and 80s, because it was in the midst of all the troubles. But in our golf club, at Lurgan Golf Club, I joined when I was 11, and I spent days and days throughout the summer. My mum would drop me off before 8 o'clock, and I'd be there until 6 o'clock, and we'd play, 54 holes a day, and so it was quite idyllic. But the club itself was brilliant, because as an 11-year-old, you quite quickly get used to, there is no them and us, it's just us. And golf was the religion at the golf course, on the club. And anybody who tried to bring anything up that was vaguely, sectarian, or they were quickly told off and quickly sent a letter by the secretary, Archie. So it was a brilliant place to grow up. And I know that sounds bizarre to say when the clubhouse was blown up a couple of times, a man was shot in the head by a sniper. This is not normal, and I appreciate that. But the club itself was just a wonderful, wonderful place. And there might have been people trying to interfere and trying to divide us, but it was absolutely, golf was the religion, and it was a players' club, as well. There were a lot of really, really good players. So it was a lovely place to grow up. And I got into golf purely by watching the opens, the Lee Trevino, during the sort of the hard opens, as I would call them, in terms of the hard ground and the brown links and stuff, and I absolutely loved it. And I love Peter Rollis as well. He's such a hero of mine. There's a photograph of myself one Christmas morning, and all my presents I pushed to one side because I got a video of Peter Rollis, and that was what I was most excited about, So I got really into it, and I eventually got my clubs when I was 11. And I got down to 5 and 6 quite young. I was about 16, and then got distracted by various things that 16-year-olds get distracted with, So
As can happen, yeah.
I know it's not as rare as you might think. And then I got into writing. I always wrote. I know it sounds daft, but at school, the moments when I got praise at school was when I was writing. I remember Mr. Flanagan reading one of my poems out. And that's always where I excelled, where I was left to my own devices and just allowed to write. And every job I sort of took, I was always found myself writing, whether it was marketing or whether it was a ghost column for Sam Torrance in The Scotsman or various things. And then I was writing articles for lots of different magazines. But it was the one thing that really resonated with me, and it is to this day. It really does. If I have a morning writing, then I'm a much better dad. Really, problems don't seem so problematic when if I've had 2 hours of just being able to write and really get into it. So yeah, so that's basically how I got here and how I got into writing.
Apologies, first of all, then, obviously, for drawing you away from the writing this morning. I know you like to write in the morning, so you're going to just have to talk about it this morning, but many thanks for that. I think it's a starting point for our discussion today. I just wanted to take a brief look at the fortunes of Leith links versus what we now know as the R&A and the old course at St. Andrews. From my research, I believe the first 13 rules of golf were formulated in 1744 by the Honourable Company of Edinburgh Golfers, who were based at Leith Links in Edinburgh on their 5-hole golf course. These golfers played annually for a silver club that the city of Edinburgh donated, and that particular version of the Honourable Company was disbanded in 1831. If we counterpoint that with the embers of the St. Andrews story, 1754, what is now known as the R&A was founded. 1764, 22 holes became 18, and in 1834, what is now the R&A received its royal designation from King William IV. So the home of golf and the foremost authority of the game was essentially founded in St. Andrews. The centre of the golfing world could conceivably have been Leith and not St. Andrews. What says Mr. McStravick?
Yeah, a lot of things have gravitated to St. Andrews. St. Andrews didn't invent the Open. It didn't invent the Amateur Championship. Didn't invent, various things, including, ladies golfing, etc. But they naturally gravitated towards St. Andrews when the fortunes of the Honourable Company peaked and troughed. So things naturally came here. The 22 holes, and the reason why we play 18 holes, was because the original 4 holes were too short. So the course was very similar in some ways to today based on the back 9. If you think they played the course back to front and they played from 18th to 17th to 17th to 16th, that would have been their front 9. The original closing green and tee box would have been in the garden approximately where Tom Morris's shop is, because they wouldn't have been there. That's all land. So the course evolves, and also just thinking about that, the course itself, that opening hole, because the first hole that we know didn't exist. That's all beach and water and sea, and the fairway was only 65 yards or so wide. So you're driving down, trying to avoid the beach on your right. There was a massive bunker called Halkett's, about 200 yards down the fairway, trying to avoid that. Then going over the Swilcan Burn, then going over the road hole bunker to the 17th green, which is tricky at the best of times. And you can see how what an incredibly difficult course it was that they played. So the evolution of the links, and the links has always been evolving. The whole entire front 9, old Tom created pretty much the entire front 9 by burning away and clearing away lots of wind to open up fairways. So it's constantly been evolving and constantly been developing. Let's say things came to St. Andrews, and when the fortunes of the Honourable Company wavered, then people looked to St. Andrews for decisions on, so how many holes are on a golf course. Well, St. Andrews has 18, purely by accident, purely by that's what fitted onto the land and best. That's why everybody plays 18 holes. So people did look to St. Andrews for rules and for their actual course as well, to be a proper course. It evolved, and it wasn't, Prestwick was only 12 holes, which I think is just a fabulous length of course. If we all play 12-hole courses today in the modern era, that would be fantastic, You could run around in an hour and a half, 2 hours. But yeah, so I think St. Andrews was very fortunate to be in the right place, so to speak, at the right time. So when people started looking to St. Andrews, it also coincided with many other aspects that, when we'll probably come on to that really helped the growth and expansion of the game. Like, golf has been played here. Well, actually, technically, even back even further. Just thinking about some of my recent research, but the St. Andrews Links has been common land since about the year 732. So when they call it the ancient links, there's a pretty good reason to call it the ancient links. So, and it was written down in various charters throughout the hundreds and hundred years that it was common land, and that's why today, St. Andrews is still, it's a public course, and that's why on Sunday it's closed and you can go walk your dogs over it, because it's common land. It is it's a remarkable place, and we have so much to thank for it. But it is also, its destiny and its success has been largely to do with fortunes of the time, really. Other people suffered more than they did. Like, even if you look at Willie Park, which I'm sure we'll come on to, his fortunes and Musselburgh's fortunes were on the decline, whereas Old Tom was meeting Prince Leopold, meeting royalty, and St. Andrews was the hub where everybody wanted to come and visit and live. And there's a direct correlation between the economic success of one and the other, where one's in decline, one's on the rise.
Absolutely. You mentioned Old Tom, and we will get on to him, but arguably, if it weren't for a gentleman called Allan Robertson, we might not have an Old Tom. Over the course of researching today, I found some sage words on a website dedicated to Allan Robertson, and I'd just like to read them out as a starting point for the next part of our chat. Golf's heritage is more than just the techniques and craftsmanship. Beyond the physical sport, there's an honourable etiquette that has been passed down through the centuries. One man was responsible for gracefully stitching together the greatest players and the titled gentry. Allan Robertson is the father of modern golf. He is the reason we use iron golf clubs. He's the reason we read about Tom Morris, and he's the reason we play the Open Championship. An innovator of the sport, an expert craftsman, and unbeaten throughout his lifetime. Please discuss the aforementioned passage, just to give our listeners some context of the importance of Allan Robertson to golf and the reason we're talking today.
Yeah, and funny enough, Allan is the topic of my next book that I'm working on. He was the original champion golfer, and he was an exceptional player. His clubs, if you saw them, would have looked like a set of wooden hybrids. They're all, even the short clubs would have looked like hybrid woods. And he was just exceptional golfer. Like, the tournaments he wasn't allowed to play in because he was so good. And especially in the 1830s and 1840s, he was known as the champion golfer. He was the best champion golfer of Scotland and therefore the world. And he was an exceptional player. And I think there's a few myths about him, a few things that have been said over the years, which are not exactly true, but it's undeniable that he was exceptional. So Allan Robertson was the champion golfer of Scotland, but it was a title that he jealously guarded and wouldn't really accept the challenges of Willie Park in the 1850s, because the thinking was, well, he worked so hard to get this title. Why should he give it away to one guy in one match, So he refused to play Willie Park. And Willie Park challenged him in the papers and the press and tried to humiliate him into having a match, but he refused to have a match. And they played matches as foursomes. And there was a famous match where Allan's playing with Mr. Weems, and Willie Park is playing with a Mr. Hasty, and they're on the 17th. Willie Park and his partner are one up and on the green in two, and Allan Robertson is off the back of the green in three. And there was a betting man there who basically shouted ridiculous odds against Allan Robertson winning. He looked in a bad spot. He was 3 over the back of the green. And he heard the sort of laughter and ridicule and stuff. And he pitched the ball and it went into the hole. And Willie Park and his partner were kind of flustered by this and thrown by it, that they 3-putted and ended up losing the hole. And then Allan went off first and knocked it down the fairway. And Willie Park topped his drive into the water and lost the match, And he was an incredible match player, and he had a little bit of gamesmanship, He would ask his caddy for a club, knowing that the caddy would give him 2 clubs less, so that they would think the hole's much further away than it really is. So a great golfer, a real character, and he was a bit of a cock of the green, He had this aura of being somebody very important about him, and he didn't have Tom's diplomacy. Tom was fantastic, and we'll talk about Tom later, but Tom was able to basically be accepted by all classes. Allan didn't really have that skill. When Allan Robertson died, he left in his will this book for his brother David. And the book was called The Robertsons of Struan in Perth. And you think, well, that's really unusual. Why is he leaving one book for his brother, Because Allan Robertson was really well read. He has scrapbooks of Chambers journals and stuff. So he was very, very well read. So he wasn't this professional who couldn't read. He was a really intelligent guy. So I researched the storyline, and it basically includes all the heroes of Scottish history. So the reason he had a sort of spring in his step was because he genuinely believed he was directly related to these greatest of Scotland's heroes. And he think this blood is flowing through his veins, and his family were golf ball makers from the 1500s in St. Andrews. So he's thinking he's the king. And that's why he had that aura about him, because he genuinely believed it. He genuinely believed that he was from these great kings. So he was a colourful guy, but he had a remarkable history. I'll not go into the detail, but just he is connected to some of the best names in Scottish history. And he came from a long line of feathery ball makers. And he fell out with Tom in 1848, and we'll make him on later. But the reason why the introduction of the gully ball was such a threat was because he was from a family of ball makers who'd been making, in essence, the same sort of feathery golf ball for hundreds of years. And then that was all going to end on his reign. So he's thinking, oh my God, this is me. I'm the one that brings the whole thing down, I'm the one that puts an end to it. This new ball is cheap. It's going to be the end of the traditional ball maker. Centuries of heritage is about to be destroyed. As it turned out, it was actually more profitable for them. They could make more balls. They could sell, even they were cheaper to sell, so they ended up selling more balls, so it ended up turning out to be a good thing. And then when he was the first person ever to break 80 on the old course. He shot 79 in 1858. He did it with a gutty ball. So yeah, I'm sure we'll go into the detail of that story a bit later, and it was just tragic that he died age 43. Could have seen him go on and designing more courses. Tom designed or redesigned over 100 courses. Allan had started to do that sort of work as well. It was so tragic. He basically had a jaundice, and over a period of 6 months, died. But his death left an open question. Who's the new champion golfer of Scotland? And that's why Prestwick created an event to find out the answer to that question. And that was the Open. And that's why you'll hear every year when the trophy's handed over, the card chug's handed over, they say the champion golfer of the year is, and it's the same question that's been asked since 1860. And that's why I absolutely love the Open.
Well, it is the pinnacle of our sport, it must be said. I mean, much and all as I have a soft spot for the other championships, it's the one you look forward to the
Yeah,
most.
no, I really do. Just the history about it. And then it's come to St. Andrews this year, which is just hugely exciting.
Yeah, you lucky devil.
I'll sit in the St. Andrews Club probably and watch most of it.
I'm sure you will, and I'll be sick with envy. Anyway, however, listen, we will get on to the first Open in 1860, but maybe it would be remiss of me not to mention, I guess, Allan Robertson, champion golfer. He had a nose for talent, and I believe in around 1836 or 1837, Allan employs a young teenager by the name of Tom Morris. They were to become great friends. They did have a disagreement. That's been overblown in terms of how much of a disagreement it actually was. They still remain great friends, I understand. What can you tell us about the initial months, years, and the relationship that was fostered between Tom Morris, who became old Tom Morris, and Allan Robertson himself?
So Tom started in 1839 when he was 18 years old. And the thing is, you have to think that at 18 years old, and Tom Morris, who said, had a golf club in my hand from as soon as I could walk, and I was down in the links as soon as he could walk. By the age of 18, he's already a phenomenal golfer. And they form a partnership. And also one thing they said, they're only 5 years apart. And I know the impression is people think, oh, Allan's 45 and Tom's 14. They're not, they're only 5 years apart.
Well, I didn't realise that.
I try to compare that to my home course in Lurgan, and it's just the guys who are a wee bit older than me. So the master and apprentice line is often used, but they're quite close in age. Tom was probably already one of the best golfers in St. Andrews. So Allan, who, as I said, was a clever guy, would have seen, well, actually, this is who I want to play with. I want to play with the best, because Allan wanted to win, so they formed a partnership. And I know they've been called all sorts of things like the Invincibles, but they won matches and they lost matches. They won more, a lot more than they ever lost. And they did create a level of excitement, which was, you have to imagine games growing in popularity and their matches are being covered in the press. So as golf is growing, it's the beginning of that really big growth of the game. It's Allan and Tom who are the heroes of St. Andrews, the Parks were the heroes of Musselburgh and stuff, and the Dunn twins. So they were a fantastic pairing who I've read about them closing up the shop because a challenge match had come through. So they were, for a period of about 9 years or so, they were close both in workplace, making feathery balls, stitching together 3 pieces of leather and filling it full of feathers. And then out on the links. So they were like brothers. I like to think of them that way, rather than a sort of master and apprentice. Because by 18 years old, Tom Morris knows how to repair a feathery ball, because he would have had to repair a feathery ball. His father was a hand loom weaver. These are not wealthy guys. And if you're playing with a feathery ball and seams start bursting, you have to know how to put it back together again, So Tom would have gone into that shop when he started, when he was 18, as a fantastic golfer and knowing how to make feathery balls. I think it's also important. I think Allan's father died about a year or so before Tom joined. So, and I think those two things are linked as well, But as I say, I like to think of them as brothers. And that friendship and kinship would see them through the ups and downs that they had.
During the 1840s, and you touched upon the expense of the feathery ball and the time it took to make one. I think they used to make 3 or 4 a day, something like that, as time would allow. During the 1840s, obviously the age of empire, and I believe a certain tree from Malaysia was found. The sap of that same tree was essentially used for the gutta percha golf ball. How important was the introduction of the gutta percha to the further development of the game?
I think it helped. It helped that as the game is growing, they found a substitute which is easier to produce and cheaper to produce. And I think that really helped open up the game more than it had done previously. There's lots of things bubbling at the same time. The game is growing. St. Andrews is going through a massive revolution, because Sir Hugh Lyon Playfair has come back from the East India Company and seen St. Andrews in complete decay and said, well, actually, this town could be the metropolis of golf. And people must have thought he had lost his mind, because the town had been decaying for like 300 years, and there was dung on the streets, and there wasn't actually streets, there was just dirt paths, where we think of North Street and South Street and stuff. But he had this vision of this transformed St. Andrews, and he completely either did it through his own money, or he got people to do it themselves, and he instilled pride in people down in the Fisher Folks area, down at the end of North Street near the cathedral, which was effectively slums. He got them to, this is your area, and get them to redevelop that. So the whole of St. Andrews was completely redeveloped, and so much money went into it. And the links as well, they were evolving, and he was doing lots of things, like the whole land reclamation thing happened on his watch. He was, so they took, as the town's evolving, there's lots of building work, trying to make this a place where middle classes could come and stay and visit. All the foundations and the rubbish that was being dumped on the town was taken and dumped on the beach and then leveled off, and then that would be our first hole. And that's why the first is like a billiard table. It's all reclaimed land from the beach. So the evolution of the gutty ball coming with this, the evolution of St. Andrews, the growth of the game becoming more affordable, plus the trains as well. The train lines opened up St. Andrews massive. So you see how this is not just one thing, it's this whole series of things that everything was moving in the right direction for St. Andrews. And it just made the game cheaper, more affordable, and when more and more people wanted to play, and more people could actually get to the links thanks to train services and stuff. So it was timely. So the problem that I mentioned earlier was that the gutta percha ball flew in the face of the traditionalists. Allan, with his love of heritage and his family history, suddenly this was being wiped out. So, and he would find, in the early days, he would find balls and keep barrel loads of them and then burn them. That's how irrational he was about it.
Wow.
Yeah, he really thought this was the end of the Robertsons. And even his scrapbook on the left-hand, inside left of the cover, there's the insignia of the Robertsons, the three wolves and stuff. And so you've got to see it in those sort of eyes, that it was hugely intimidating and frightening for someone who's thinking, you can imagine that the whole heritage of your family is about to be taken away, and it's going to be on your watch. So we would have felt a lot of pressure. And so Tom was out playing on the course, and I think it was with Captain Broughton. And Tom ran out of golf balls, and the person he was playing with said, well, here, borrow one of these high-tech gutty balls, because it was smooth as well, because it effectively was a billiard. Put it over one recently, and it is like a billiard ball. And Tom played well with the gutty ball. And it's coming off the 18th green, and Allan came out to greet them and who's won the money today, and all that sort of banter. And he was told that Tom had been playing with the gutty ball. And they went into the shop afterwards and had a raging row and decided to part ways as, working together. So that's when Tom set up his first shop at 15 The Links, a little tiny white building. It's effectively a pig shed, really. And that was Tom's first shop. But the important thing is that, and it does come back to how close they were, the golf team never broke up. Golf team stayed together. they fell apart as employer and an employee. And it was probably a good thing for Tom, because Tom wanted the gutty ball, and he wanted, Tom was always, and we may come on to this later, but Tom was very much about the future of the game and involvement and more people playing in the game and cheaper forms of the game and making it accessible to everyone. That's the spirit of St. Andrews, is that golf was free. The links was free. They certainly didn't pay to go play on this common land. So they stayed together, and Allan would visit Prestwick and vice versa. There's photographs of Tom with Allan Robertson on the links in the 1850s when he's gone away to Prestwick. So they stayed friends. They fell out over the gutty ball, but it was absolutely a storm in a teacup. And also, it was economically prudent that the golf team, the best golf team in the world, didn't fall apart when they were making good money. And by good money, it could be 10%, 10% of the pot. So, for example, 1848, they played the Dunn twins, 1848, 49, and the pot was £400. And they won the match. They were playing against the Parks, or the Dunn twins, sorry. They would have got 10% of that. So you think, okay, they would have got £40 or £20 each. But a man's annual salary as a greenkeeper was £5, or thereabouts. So this is like 4 years' salary in one mat in one day. So that's why they stayed together. But also, I think they liked each other's company. If you think yourself back to those partnerships, yourself where you've played with a friend and match play and you've done well, if you're close to the person, you can almost read their mind, and it's so important in golf. And I think that's what they did. They were very, very close, and they were like brothers. You had the odd squabble, but the important thing was that they stayed together and played together. And
Tom would obviously move on to become head professional and keeper of the greens at Prestwick for a time. Obviously, while there, he developed some greenkeeping approaches that we still use today. Also, if I'm correct, I might not be correct, did young Tom born in St. Andrews, or was he born in Prestwick? I know he went to school in our academy when he was in Prestwick.
Yeah, no, born in St. Andrews, but at the age of 1, they moved to
Okay.
So all Tom's either open wins or education, etc., happened in Prestwick.
Needless to say, and there's probably a podcast in Old Tom at Prestwick by itself, we can fast forward, and apologies for doing this, but fast forward through his days at Prestwick. Obviously, as you mentioned earlier on, Allan died quite young. I think it was 1859 at the age of 43. His death leads to the creation of what we now know as the Open Championship and the crowning of the champion golfer of the year with the Open belt. You might tell us a little bit about how the first running of the Open Championship came to be, which I believe was at Prestwick in 1860. Obviously, Tom Morris, old Tom, is the pro and the keeper of the greens at Prestwick. Must have been a lot of pressure on him to try and win the belt. Unfortunately, Willie Park wins that. And what can you tell us about that, Roger?
So the Open was created to answer that question about who's the new champion golfer. It was good for Prestwick as it was publicity for their relatively young course. James Ogilvy Fairley and Earl of Eglinton, effectively created the event. So the pressure on Tom was twofold, really. So the first of all was, this is the links that he had designed. There was a course there, but a short course, and then he put this new links over it. And the opening hole was 578 yards, which was just incredible. You think the first, if the professionals were hitting at 200 yards, so your average player wouldn't have been hit anywhere near that. So the first one must have seemed like an absolute monster. But that's why I said that Tom Morris has got an eye for the future throughout his whole life. So it was. So first of all, when they had the Open, the pressure on Tom was great. So the pressure was, it's the course he designed, So if anybody should know all the tricks and intricacies and all where's the best place to put it, etc., it's Tom, and he's already one of the best players, if not the best player at the time. So there's that pressure, but also it's Allan's title. Allan had been so jealously protecting this title for a number of years, and he would have felt, oh my God, I have to win this for Allan as well. He would have felt that it was Allan's title. That keeps resonating with me. It's Allan's title, and so he would have felt a lot of pressure for that. So, to lose it, and he also he looked. At one stage he was close to winning it, and then the closing holes got into trouble, etc. And then Woodley Park wins, but that would have devastated him. That would have been, with the members of the club, and it just would have been really awkward for Tom. And by God, does he make up for it? He wins in 61 and wins in 62. And when he wins in 62, he wins by 13 shots. And that is still today
That's
the
Tiger-esque.
largest. Yeah, exactly. It is. But it's still today the largest margin of victory. So if you look down the stats, it'll say Tom Morris, largest margin of victory, Tom Morris. Oldest winner of the Open, Tom Morris. He was 46 when he won it in 67. He's the only father ever to come second to his son. He just was a remarkable man. But I absolutely, I think that loss in 1860, and it does feel like the loss, would mean a very bitter pill for him to swallow. It would have made him very angry. And there's nothing worse than an angry golfer. You see a golfer on the tee after a 3-putt. You know what I mean?
So I believe he returns to St. Andrews, obviously, as keeper of the greens and professional in 1864, which would obviously then lead to a young whippersnapper called young Tom Morris, who was a Mozart type character in terms of being so good, so young. What can you tell us about, first of all, old Tom's return to St. Andrews, and then maybe the rise of his young son Tom?
So old Tom's coming back to St. Andrews as the absolute hero. He wins the Open in 1864, so he is actually the reigning Open champion that year. So he comes back an absolute hero, and then starts to work on the green, starts to work on the caddies. In 1869, around about then, he created the 18th green, which just to slide aside, when they were building that green, the workmen found a cholera pit, and being a superstitious bunch, because only 120 years previously they'd been throwing witches off the cliffs of the Scores to find out if there were witches. So they're a superstitious bunch, so they're down tools when they saw this pit of bones, and then Tom basically said, unless you finish this green, you won't be getting paid. So they picked up their tools, got over their superstitions quite quickly, and finished the 18th green. So the 18th green used to be a tiny little green in a sort of hollow, and became this.
Which is probably 40 or 50 yards further back than it currently is, yeah?
No. Same place.
Same place. I beg your pardon. Okay.
Yeah, no. There's been lots written saying that the green was up on the Martyrs monument, but that's not true. The RNA minutes since 1764 are really very clear that and this was the 22 holes going to 18, but it says that the opening 4 holes, as they're currently set out, meaning that the end hole is still the end hole, so the end hole is not somewhere else, it's exactly the same place. So it was never up near the Martyrs Mound. I think there's some confusion because it used to be called Hole of the Hill, and people thought, it must mean the green was up the hill. But there used to be a massive mound there as well, and that's why Allan Robertson's house is called Sandy Hill. And that big, massive mound was taken away during Playfair's revolution. The 18th green was the one thing Tom said he was most proud of, and it is a brilliant green, because if you're playing, you think it's a billiard table, you're walking up. But if you stand on the steps of the RNA, it's a massively sloping green. So the optical illusion is fantastic.
It slopes right to left as the player plays it from the fairway, yeah?
Yeah, but it looks as if it won't move much. But if you stand on the steps in the R&A and you see that slant, you'll allow a lot more than you, because normally you think, oh, it's just a flat green, so just hit straight at the flag, But it's not. It's a massively sloping green. So the color pit's still there, and it's the where the green slopes to the back right hand corner. It slopes up there. That's where the color.
Delightful. So he was most proud of that, and it's a lasting monument to him. What can you tell us about his young whippersnapper of a son?
Tommy was a maverick. By the age of 13, he's already beating Open champions, and then wins the Open 3 times as a teenager. And then there's no Open in 1871 because there's no trophy, because you win it 3 times in a row, you get to keep the champion's belt. And then they create the claret jug, but they don't have it ready for 1872. So Tommy gets a medal in 1872. But his name is the first name that goes on it the next year when Tom Kidd wins it in St. Andrews. So, just an exceptional, unique talent. And again, his set of clubs, and remember, there's no bag. It's clubs that are held under the arm. They're all woods. There is a sort of wrought iron, but the majority of the sets in those days, in those early Opens, were a set of hybrids. So if anybody gives you grief about you're using a hybrid 6 or 5 or something like that, well, you got the moral authority to say I'm following the footsteps of old Tom Morris.
Just tell him to piss off. Just going back to that wrought iron thing, just for those listeners that perhaps don't know, am I correct in saying that club, obviously it's a metal club, which is essentially designed for getting a good aperture golf ball out of a kart track?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is deliberately small to fit into the kart track. So it's about the same size as a ball. If you've seen one. So and it's very heavy as well. But and I've read lots of things about, Tommy could get backspin, and I've never read. I haven't, and I read a lot of 19th century paper reports and stuff, and I've never read that somebody said, he could spin the ball back. I don't even know if it was a thing, but it would, but obviously it makes, good movie scenes and stuff like that, But he was exceptional. There's no doubt about it, to win the Open 3 times as a teenager. And then, so he gets the belt outright and then wins it once more until his, untimely death, it's just tragic, really.
I guess just something to say, if people are more interested in young Tom Morris, Stephen Proctor has a great book called Monarch of the Green, which is well worth a read.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's also been a lot of myths about what happened on that day his wife died. And so the truth is, Tom and Tommy were playing a match at North Berwick against the Parks, and the Morrises won the day. And as they're coming off the green, the 18th green, they were handed a telegram, and it said for Tommy to get home very soon because his wife's having difficulty in labour. So they eventually arranged a boat rather than going through the train and stuff like that, just a boat straight across. As the boat was pulling out, just as it was pulling out, a second telegram arrived, and it said his wife had died. The people at the shore could have called him back, and they decided not to call him back. So Tommy travels over the water, not knowing what's happening, what's going on. And he ran down North Street, and Reverend Boyd was at the door, and it's one Albany place. It's still there today. If you can visit St. Andrews, you'll see the house. And Reverend Boyd said to him on the door, "I'm so sorry for your loss." And Tommy said, it's not true, it's not true. And sprinted upstairs, and his wife was dead and child stillborn. So it's just an absolute tragedy, really. The next couple of months, Tommy was a shadow of himself, and he was broken. I've heard he turned to drink, but again, I don't know if that was romantic license. But he plays the odd match. And then he plays a match against Arthur and Molesworth. But this is a good 4 weeks prior to Christmas Eve, and now he's moved out of his marital home. He's moved back into his family home with Tom and with his mum and dad, with Tom and Nancy. And on Christmas Eve, he says goodnight to them and goes to bed, and he doesn't surface in the morning. So Tom goes in, and Tommy's there dead in his sleep, or died in his sleep. He had a burst aneurysm in a lung and actually bled to death, but would have looked as peaceful as can be. So yeah, just and the shock of his death was, if you imagine Tiger Woods after he had won like 6 or 7 or 8 majors suddenly dying, that was the shock of it all, And so they created a statue for him. A number of clubs, societies came together and paid for a statue for Tommy. And there's a photograph of Tom and Tommy together, and used that photograph as the basis of the statue. So, and Mrs. Walker, who is old Tom's great granddaughter and still lives in the house there beside the 18th Green, keeps that statue as fresh as can be. It looks fantastic. So constantly getting.
I believe the size of it just dwarfs everything else in the graveyard.
It is wonderful and very, very, very poignant. And the sad thing about Tommy is what else could he have done? He was already touring with D.V. Strath. He's touring around England as this superstar golfer and being paid lots of money, for appearance money. He's completely turning that idea of professionals on their head. Because professionals until his era were, the working class, whereas his education in Prestwick was certainly not working class, and his friends were not working class boys. So that's why if someone said to him, yeah, come and play a game and we'll do some betting on your match, and he would no, you pay me to play. So he got money for his appearance money. Then I was reading recently, and there was I saw a photograph of his locker it was opened in 1899, 24 years or so after he died, and it hadn't been opened. And in it was the coat he wore when he played golf and his clubs in this locker. And again, it's all a set of woods. Just so poignant that it hadn't even been touched for 24 years. So yeah, so he was just a maverick guy, exceptional. And I think the town was truly heartbroken when he passed.
I've heard you speak about the combined record of old and young Tom. It's probably useful just to let listeners know what the specific of these feats was. It's really quite astonishing.
Yeah. So Tom's records were literally, Tom Morris was the oldest. He was large in margin victory. He only fathered had come second. His son is the youngest winner of the Open Championship, winning 3 times as a teenager. He won the belt outright. Then won it for the 4th time in 1872. So between them, they have 8 Opens. They are truly exceptional. The dynamic, though, between St. Andrews and Musselburgh and the competitiveness, I think they shared the first 20-odd Opens, maybe even 24 Opens or so.
Wow.
Were either from Musselburgh or they were from St. Andrews, They were the capitals of golf. And then when Musselburgh's fortunes waned, just as St. Andrews is rising and rising, then the focus comes to St. Andrews, But as a golfing family, they were they were just exceptional, and that's why, you think of Tom Morris, and he touches every element of golf, and that's why they called him the grand old man of golf. So he was a caddy as a young boy, so the caddy saw him as one of their own. So when he comes back to St. Andrews, he tries to instill standards that all the caddies must adhere to get away from, this sort of caddy with no shoes and this sort of thing. The urchin caddy. So trying to instill within, they're wearing proper clothes, etc., and they're being properly so he's a caddy, he's a player, and is the best player in the world. And then he goes on to design, over 100 courses or redesign as well. So he sets that template where professionals in their twilight years design courses. That Tom Morris. He truly was an exceptional human being. And as you mentioned before, lots of the things that he did and invented are still in use today. Top dressing, that's Tom Morris. And it happened by accident when he spilled sand in Prestwick, and then came back a day or two later and he found the grass was thriving. So he went nuts and poured it all over the course and got in lots of trouble.
Turned the golf course into a beach.
Exactly. but obviously the grass loved it. So just an amazing family. And then, you should have Mungo Park on your show to talk about Willie Park, because I think poor Willie has been maligned over the years. But I think the true story is still to come out. Mungo's working on a book, so hopefully that will come out. Tom Morris and him played together often as partners. In some matches, it was Willie and Tom versus such and such. But Willie said he prefers playing against Tom Morris than with him. So you can see that dynamic when I say Allan Robertson and Tom Morris were like brothers and could read each other's minds. That's a good foursome partnership. It's Tom and Willie Park was akin to Putin Tiger with Phil Mickelson. It didn't work out fantastic.
No. Look, in advance of another question pertaining to the growth of the game around this time, I thought it might be instructive to look at a number of facts and figures as it pertains to the expanding nature of the game of golf in Scotland, England, Ireland. And particularly, it's interesting you mentioned the parks there, in addition to Old Tom and the influence that they had throughout Scotland, England and Ireland. So we just look at 1857, I believe there was 17 golf clubs in Scotland. By 1888, with 73. So obviously the game expanded into England and Ireland to the latter part of the 1860s. Just look at England for a snapshot of there. Old Tom was involved in the development of Royal North Devon. His brother George at Royal Liverpool, 1869. Obviously Royal Liverpool would go on to inaugurate the Amateur Championships in 1885. Two notable members there would be John Ball and Harold Tilton, who were the first English champion golfers of the year, both being members of Royal Liverpool. In an Irish context, and again, there is a podcast in this in of itself, but obviously the military and Scottish business people brought the game to Ireland in the 1850s. We're looking at the Curragh Camp, which was a Crimean War training camp, commonage land beside that, and the Scottish officers looked out the window going, that's an inland links, let's go and build a golf course. Lahinch obviously has a connection with the Black Watch Regiment in founding in 1892. Old Tom obviously was involved there in terms of turning the golf course into 18 holes, I believe, in 1894. And then the Scottish business people and merchants obviously responsible for the Belfast Golf Club, which would become the Royal Belfast Golf Club in 1885. Dublin Golf Club, which was set up in the Phoenix Park by a Scottish banker called John Lumsden, my own home course, in 1885. Royal designation in 1891, the County Club in Portrush in 1888, becoming Royal Portrush somewhere between 1892 and 1895. The Links at Newcastle County Down, 1889, Royal designation in 1908. Old Tom was involved there in 1889. And Rossapenna, which Old Tom designed on behalf of Lord Leitrim, the Old Tom Morris golf course, some of which holes are still up there. And Mungo Park, in fact, was involved in laying out Portmarnock's first golf club in 1894. Mungo, of course, was the 1874 Open champion. John Jamieson was the landlord from the Scottish stock of Jamieson Distillery fame. I think it's pretty clear that without the influence of Allan Robertson, Old and Young Tom, and the men of St. Andrews, that the game of golf as we know it may not be as worldly developed or popular as it is today. Do you agree with my assertion?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely, 100%. But it's the same people spreading the game. So it's, the Curragh, my sister's a member of the Curragh. That was Earl of Eglinton, who was associated with the creation of that course. So yeah, so wherever there's money, there's golf courses opening up all over the place. The fundamental difference between what we had in St. Andrews was that in St. Andrews golf was free. The links was free. It was open lab, and even today, my kids get golf history lessons in their school classes.
Brilliant.
They get golf lessons with Salja. That's available for any kid in St. Andrews. And the whole on Sundays, me and the kids just go down to the driving range and hit balls, and the backdrop is the RNA building. So it's absolutely everywhere. It is literally a home of golf, where everything rotates around golf. But and lots of the things that those early professionals did, whether it's Tommy touring around courses and spreading the word that way, or Old Tom and Allan Robertson's matches going into the press, or the fantastic rivalry between Willie Park and Tom Morris. They are spreading the game constantly, and then Tom's doing that in a physical way by actually, designing these courses. But the difference is, in St. Andrews, it was free, whereas in lots of the places where the new courses went, it was on sort of landed gentry estates. So therefore, there was an elite attitude about golf, which doesn't exist here in St. Andrews. There's absolutely, you say you play golf, it's like, yeah, so what? Whereas growing up in the Lurgan, it was like you played golf. It thought that, there was this impression that you were elite or something, which was crazy. Like I remember we won golf tournaments, school golf tournaments, and then we had this principal, Sister St. Anne, who would frighten the devil. You know what I mean? He'd be just like he would purse you in front and go, I'm not doing this.
Is she like the sister from Derry Girls? A little bit like that.
But crueler.
What a witch is that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, completely. Jesus has left the building. It was just. So we won a golf tournament. So the next day, she would want to present it to us in front of the whole school. And it was traumatic, honestly. It was just like, it was booze. So when the Gaelic team, and I played Gaelic as well, I played for Armagh and all that, and the Gaelic team got up. It was like the heroes that come home from war, But the golf team got up. It was like, boo, it was just so. There was the impression that these were the rich boys, which is wasn't true.
That's very much like the whole idea of garrison games. Your rugby, your cricket, your golf, whatever else. And look, you're absolutely right. That is where where it started in an Irish context. The whole island, and slowly but surely, obviously that has changed somewhat. But I guess the echo chamber that is golf, we tend to talk to ourselves rather than actually talking to the community in terms of and being a little bit less close-minded, shall we say?
Yeah. Well, I remember I went to Sister St. Anne and suggested that we play rugby and hockey in the school, and she looked at me like I was Linda Blair in The Exorcist. The power of Christ compelled you, It was just the most hideous thing I could have possibly.
Gonna have a bath in the holy water. Blasphemer, sorry.
and she said, no, we're a traditional Irish school and we only play Irish sports. And she was as anti-English as there could be. And as I said, Jesus had left this lady a long time ago. But that elitism, it's not in St. Andrews, honestly, and obviously today golf's cheaper and is not seen so much as an elite sport, But when I first moved, that's where the impression comes from, because it's certainly not, the spirit of St. Andrews is it's just a game, and everybody should play, from the kids to ladies to,
While doing some further research, and again, it's kind of slightly off topic, but it does speak to Old Tom's specific sphere of influence and what cascaded from St. Andrews. And I know the golfing world was smaller back then, but I was sort of mind officially blown in relation to this, and I did know some of it. But C.B. Macdonald, who was well known as the creator of the template holes and the ideal holes, and obviously created the first 18-hole golf course in the USA in Chicago, was a companion of young Tom. I think he got his first set of clubs from Old Tom, and was taught the game essentially by the Morrises. 1892, Old Tom expanded Royal Dornoch's golf course. A young Donald Ross was a member of Dornoch at the time. Obviously, he went on to apprentice with Old Tom at St. Andrews and moved to the USA in 1899. Sure, he only designed 400 odd golf courses in the States. I'm sure no one's ever heard of him. 1896, Albert Warren Tillinghast visited St. Andrews for a while, where he became very friendly with Old Tom. He was a very prolific designer in the States. Also with Opus designs, including Bethpage Black, Baltusrol, and Wingfoot, amongst others. Old Tom was also very friendly with a guy called Douglas Rolland, who I believe came from Ely. Went on to mentor one Harry Shopton Colt, firstly at Malvern in Gloucestershire, and then obviously co-designed Rywood Colt. Colt is often referred to as the father of modern golf course architecture, so maybe I'm easily impressed, but we have a saying here in Ireland, as you well know, coined from a very popular sitcom from the 1990s, and I think this sums up Old Tom Morris and everything we've spoken about thus far. That's mad, Ted.
Absolutely. I just think of the people who came and spent time with Tom and then went back to America and created these hundreds and thousands of links and courses. It's just astounding. And I say that's why he was known and revered in his lifetime. This is something people have done retrospectively. In his lifetime as the grand old man of golf, because he knew almost every inch of golf. And he touched every inch of golf and tried to improve everything, And imagine if you took the old course and said, well, actually, I'm going to just create 9 new holes. The world would be up in arms, but effectively that's what he created. The first hole, I think it was around 1872. He just put a new green and just over the burn, until that point, they were still playing to the 17th green. I've seen it written that the first green was supposed to be a new green for the 17th, so that it played straight. But I can't verify that, but it would make sense. But he creates that first green, creates a new first hole, and then just opens up the whole front 9 that we know it, and changes the direction of play. Builds a new 18th green. That's St. Andrews. It's always evolving. If you see pictures of the 17th, the road hole bunker, pictures of it, and it's waist high. You could get out with a putter almost. So it's just St. Andrews, and everything. Nothing changes, but everything evolves. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. Very sadly, most everybody in the Morris family predeceased Old Tom. He passed away in 1908, and I'm just interested to understand how keenly his loss was felt around the RNA clubhouse and indeed further afield.
Yeah, devastating. It really was. And there's lots of myths about how he died, and it was just let me just to explain exactly what happened. So Tom was in the new golf club, and he was having a cup of tea, and the minutes of the new club are fantastic. So they detail this, so he wasn't drinking, and he's a church elder, and it was a church day as well. And there was 2 doors, and one door was to the bathroom, and one door was down to the cellar. Now, if you know pub cellars, the steps to them are really, really, steep. It's probably because they can get up with a barrel and stuff. But I did a bit of filming recently and got to go into this actual area. And the thing is, if you took one step and missed the step, there's nothing to stop you from falling down the stairs and banging your head either off the flagstones at the bottom, because it's all still there, exactly the same, or the wall, the old wall. Because literally, at the bottom of the steps, there is, one flagstone. So at best, 2 feet at very most. So you've come down, you can't grab onto anything, and you're just tumbling and rolling, and then bang, he would have cracked it, and he cracked his skull, and he was unconscious, and they took him up to I think it was Gibson Hospital, and he never regained consciousness, and that, so he died a few hours later. But so he was never drinking or anything like that. There was nothing. I know it's more dramatic and stuff to say, but he was having a cup of tea and took the wrong door. Just a simple accident. But he had a fantastic life. He really did. To live to, 87 years in the 19th century, would almost make you like 132. And, today, it's just a remarkable life. He outlived all his children. Design courses, had the best businesses. Honestly, I don't think, he's up in heaven looking down on his life. I think he wouldn't feel nothing but, well, that was fun.
Jot that down. And you've been living that story, I guess, for 20 odd years. And obviously living in St. Andrews as well, it gives you an opportunity to just soak it all in. A little bit about your writing now, if you don't mind. You've won the USGA Herbert Warren Wind Book Award in 2015 and indeed in 2020 for your books entitled St. Andrews in the Footsteps of Old Tom Morris and St. Andrews the Road War Papers. Presumably been dealing with the footsteps of old Tom Morris for the last wee while. The Road War Papers sounds like a fascinating delve into the history of the old grey tune. I believe it includes rabbit warrens, stones, a fella called James Cheap. I'm sure it's a fascinating read. You might just tell us what it, a précis of what it's all about, and what some of what you've found that was, I guess, heretofore unknown.
This book was an absolute joy to research, and honestly, I love spending time at the University Special Collections Department. And it was thanks to them that I even had the material. I was researching for Footsteps, the first one that won the USGA award. And Katrina came over and said, "Oh, we've got this box of papers called the St. Andrews Links, but we don't know what it is. Would you like to look at it anyway?" And I said, yeah, absolutely. And I could have...
Right place, right time. Katrina's the head of collections, yeah?
Yeah, she's one of the team there. She's one of the team. And in it was a lot of statements, but it was statements by Tom Morris, speaking about his oldest memory of the links. And then what he thought about something to do with the road. At that point, I had no idea what it was. And there was Jamie Anderson and John White Melville and all these great names of St. Andrews. And I was, that's amazing, because there's a treasure trove of information, because all of these people are talking about their earliest memories. And people are remembering when first house was made, for example, on the east of the Wynd, I think he's called it, and it was a guy called George Clark. But that Clark became Clark's Wynd, which eventually became Granny Clark's Wynd. These are the people who took the rubbish. When I talked earlier about taking the rubbish from the town and dumping it on the beach and creating the first hole, well, this is the man who took the rubbish from the town, and it was just a treasure trove of information. So with the book, I kind of didn't want to get in the way. I wanted the statements to people to talk themselves. This is like a sort of oral history of St. Andrews. And all these great little nuggets and nuances and things we didn't know before. And I just again I loved the research, So there's sections from all the sort of heroes, so Tom Morris and that sort of the professional golfers and stuff. But there are other ones like from carters and people in town who happen to be there during something really amazing happening on the links, or that whole landscape around the 18th green and how that evolved, So because the course used to go right up to the door of Tom Morris shop, and that was the court case in particular was that some of the people who built their houses there, just overlooking the 18th fairway, wanted to have a road, and they were willing to pay for the road themselves. And the council said, absolutely, but you have to pay for it yourselves and upkeep it yourself. And then one of the town councillors thought this was sacrilege. How do you stick a road on the St. Andrews, ancient links? It's not yours to give away. And he took them to court over this issue, and it went all the way to the House of Lords. And it was just an amazing case. And so Tom Morris is both, he gives statements before the trial, but he also is cross-examined in court. And Jimmy Anderson is. And so all my sort of heroes, this was them speaking about. So that's why we now know definitively that Tom started in 1839 with Allan Robertson, because he says so in being cross-examined in court. So lots of these little things that until now we've been sort of guessing at, thinking, he probably was an apprentice, so he must have been a teenager, but now we definitely know he was 18. So lots of these little sort of nuggets are in there, and it's just lovely to hear their own voices and their own sense of humor, because, and there's lots of laughter in the court, when some people are saying something. So yeah, so it is just a wonderful insight to the people themselves, and hopefully I haven't got in the way too much.
So essentially, it's a title dispute, rebuilding a new road, and ultimately creating what we see as the backdrop of the first and the 18th.
Yeah, absolutely. So the road down the side of the 18th today, that's what it was all over. Instead of the houses going, or the course going right to their front doors, they wanted a road. So it was, I've studied a lot about the people, and that's what I really find interesting. I haven't studied the actual links, bizarrely, I haven't studied the links too much, because I just find people like Playfair and George Bruce and Tom Morris and these people who completely revolutionized St. Andrews from where it was in sort of 1820s as this disheveled, decrepit city, to all the massive building work to completely change St. Andrews. There's only a couple of thousand people lived in St. Andrews at one point, so just to veer off for a second, it was a place of pilgrimage. The bones of St. Andrew were here. People would come here for hundreds and hundreds of years, Then John Knox gave a speech in the summer of 59, and in the Holy Trinity Church, and then the locals were incensed, went and tore down the cathedral and the two monasteries, Greyfriars and Blackfriars. But the whole economy of St. Andrews was that, because it had this large cathedral, it was the centre of sort of ecclesiastical Scotland, and it was this fantastic place of importance where all the wealth of all the churches came to St. Andrews. But overnight, that was torn away. So from 1559 until early 1800s, St. Andrews was falling apart, completely decaying, castle decaying. The cathedral became an open mine where people were allowed to use the stones to build their houses. If you see the pier is built purely out of the stones from the old cathedral.
Wow.
So John Knox has a lot to answer for. The fortunes of St. Andrews. It was the home of God, and then eventually became the home of golf. So, but there was this period where the town was called decrepit. So when you see it now, and having studied all this, it makes me so grateful for Playfair and George Bruce and people like John Milne and architects, and who basically rebuilt St. Andrews. So yeah, so I sorry to veer off, but I just love the history of St. Andrews, and them and the witches and the witch trials, and throwing somebody off the cliff to see if they'll float on water. You know, but and so yeah, so just the history of St. Andrews, I just find utterly fascinating and bizarre witch trials. They're just hilarious to read about people being afraid of a bee because they thought it was a witch that had transformed herself into a bee. Anyway.
Anyway, moving on slightly, you mentioned earlier on that you're working on your next book, which is on the aforementioned Allan Robertson. I understand that you may have taken over the writing of that particular manuscript from somebody else.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of wondering when you hope to release or complete the book on Allan.
Yeah, it was lovely guy, Bill Williams, came to St. Andrews and met myself and a couple of other historians and said he wanted to do this book. And I was so supportive with him. I asked him to stay back for a few minutes after the meeting, and I said, you have a vision for this book. You go for it and you do it, and if I can help you in any way, just give me a shout, And we kept in touch. And he lived in America, but he was I think he was from Kent. And he was a lovely, lovely guy. And he was going to come back to St. Andrews, and then said he felt his health was taking a bit of a turn, but he would be back in touch to let me know when he's coming back to St. Andrews. And then it just popped up on Facebook, that he had died. And such a shock, I'd been emailing him, a week or two beforehand, And he had pancreatic cancer, and, that's just one way traffic now. Father-in-law died of that as well. At the minute, there's very little that can be done. So I am when his daughter came over to release some of his ashes, I met up with her at the Fairmont for a coffee, and she had this green bag with her. I think just for your own, I've still got it. And it's filled with papers on Allan Robertson, and she said, "Could you finish this for my dad?" And I said, "Yes, absolutely." And until that point, I hadn't been the biggest fan of Allan Robertson because I hadn't studied him, but now I am completely.
You believed what you read, and I guess in many ways, some of my errors today have come from not reading your stuff, Roger, obviously, or not reading enough of your stuff, shall we say?
Well, do you know what? No historian is perfect, and my hero is a guy called David F. Fleming, and his notes and the detail that he has is brilliant. It may be a hard read, but there'll be something in there that will help you with your research. But even he wrote a book on the St. Andrews links, and he wrote it first of all in the paper that in the Citizen they did little sections of it, and then they published it properly as a book. But the opening line of that book says, "This has corrected all the inaccuracies that were printed in the papers." So everybody will make a mistake, and honestly, I think there's nothing worse than a pompous historian because everyone will make a mistake somewhere along the lines and have to do a mea culpa, So yeah, so what were we talking about? Sorry, I got distracted.
We were talking about Allan and the book. So you were explaining to me the green bag, and his daughter had asked you to complete it, and you said you would, and you weren't a fan of Allan, and
I am now. I am, because I have when you do any history book, you really want to go back to the primary sources and read original material that hasn't been filtered, and he's coming across as there's a kindness about him that I had never gotten before, which really appeals. There is a popularity about him which I'd never gotten before. There was humor about him that I'd never gotten before. So he's coming across as, instead of being this sort of egotistical, selfish guy, which is the impression that I've been given so far, he's far from it. And people are talking about his kindness, which is something I would never have put, in my descriptions of Allan Robertson. So it's a joy to do and joy to research. And Bill had written about 40,000 words. So I'm sort of building on that and then adding in my own research. But the book itself will be co-authored by the pair of us.
Sounds like a weighty tome.
It is, but we'll see. I just, it's with every book you want to be evolving, and we'll see. I think I want to make it readable and relatable. So when I'm talking about his relatives in the 1500s, and you think of the events in the 1500s, the burning of the witches and all of that stuff, and the martyrs, and all the different things that are going on historically at the time in St. Andrews, so it sort of brings, what I'm trying to do is bring eras to life. So what they went through. So, and then, in the 1700s, they're going through the rabbit wars in St. Andrews, but they're going through the changing of the links from 22 to 18 holes. So it's not just a born, lives, dies, including his relatives. It's about what's happening at that time as well.
It's the story of the time in addition to his story.
Absolutely. But the story of the Robertsons is the story of St. Andrews, because it's going from 1500s right through to, that are actually recorded from the 1500s right through to, to Allan. So,
just out of interest, are there any Robertsons still involved in the game of golf in St. Andrews?
No, but there are relatives. And Australia has a very strong connection to Allan's brother David, because Allan didn't have any children. So he was married twice but had no children. There are relatives, Robertson relatives. So it just, but they are in Australia. Same with Jamie Anderson's. When I was doing the headstone for Jamie Anderson a few years back, the only relatives I could find were, because you need their permission to do the headstone, and we're over in New Zealand.
Okay.
And then about a week before we went, the ceremony happened, the unveiling of the headstone, and Sandy Lyle there and stuff. An even closer relative turned up in Anstruther, which is is 8 miles away.
Road,
Yeah, but luckily she thought it was brilliant, and she was very excited about it. And there's a lovely photograph of us all there on the day, unveiling Jamie's headstone, and Sandy Lyle's there, and it's brilliant. And for that, I just wanted somebody, because Jamie won the Open 3 times, and he living at, I guess, 9 the links, and just overlooking the 18th green. But when he died, no headstone was added to his grave. And I just, when I was researching footsteps, it just kept coming back to me. And I just thought, I have to do something about this. And I did some crowdfunding, and with the help of the RNA and the St. Andrews Pilgrim Foundation, we got it over the line. A local stonesmith in St. Andrews did the headstone. But I wanted Jamie to have the burial that he should have had. Because in the papers at the time it said this is there was news about his death and about the funeral, but it said this is an intimation, not an invitation, i.e. this is just to let you know this funeral's happening. But it's not an invitation. So where Tom Morris, so you see the photograph of Tom Morris's funeral, it's the whole length of South Street, and you've got professionals there and gentlemen golfers there. The Prime Minister, A.J. Balfour, raised funds for Tom, and annuity, so that he would have some money after he retired. The Prime Minister. Mm-hmm. But Jamie Anderson, who won 3 times, had nothing. And I just found it really, really hard. And that's why I started the project. And luckily we were able to get over the line. It took a bit of time, because you have to go through Historic Scotland, you have to fill in forms, the headstone has to make sure it does, it's conforming, etc. But it was just a joy to have a champion there, a major, an open champion there, the way Tom did. Tom had the open champions there, and now Jamie had the open champion there, just to say a few words by the graveside. So It was a lovely day. Sunshine, it was just beautiful.
Well, I have to say I'm very impressed, and thank you for all of golf for doing that. It was something very worthwhile and something well deserved in terms of Jamie's headstone.
Yeah, there's a couple of others there. I think Jack Burns and Tom Kidd, I think, currently don't have a headstone. And that does, that does not sit well with me.
It sounds like it bothers you, which I think is very pointed, and I think it should bother the rest of golf also.
Yeah, it just, no one left behind. It was an incredible thing to win an Open Championship, and it's just, it takes a long time to get it through the system and the paperwork and the headstone and the approval, and it just takes a long time. But yeah, so hope maybe if it hasn't been done, I'll pick it up again maybe in a couple of years' time. I've just
you have enough on your plate by the sounds of it with the Allan Robertson book, and obviously your little small job with the British Golf Collectors Society, editing Through the Green. What can you tell us about the society and the publication that you edit?
The British Golf Collectors Society is just this wonderful group of people who love their golf history, love collecting, love, whether it's clubs or photographs or golf balls or paintings or, hickory clubs. And the magazine we produce every quarter is called Through the Green. So in the editor of that, there's about 10 articles, and the articles in each edition, it's like the Lancet for golf history. They're really well researched, really well annotated, professionally, academically, set out, but just wonderful. And I love it with a passion. And I love, people who have an interest in a certain subject and being able to get, their research onto paper and then over the line. It's just wonderful. So every edition, I'm dealing with lots of different subjects, whether it's Bobby Jones, Tom Morris, Doug Rowland, who you just mentioned. So it's the latest research about these folk. And just an absolute passion. And the articles are fantastic. And we have a set of seasoned writers and really well-known historians who, so for example, I would get an article in and then I would direct it to one of those, and they would help them make sure the structure's there, etc., and then get it back to me. So it's a lovely, kind network of people, who share their knowledge and share their new knowledge with fellow enthusiasts, and they do it for free and purely for their love of history, And we've had so many amazing writers over the year, like John Hannah was a particular Irish historian. Bill Gibson, who's a member of the Curragh as well, Colonel Bill Gibson. Uh-huh. It's a lot about the Irish golf history. So yeah, just wonderful, absolutely wonderful, and exciting to see what people come up with. I've just received an article about Davy Robertson.
Wow.
So some man has spent a long time researching Davy Robertson, Alan's brother. So that will go in the September edition. The next edition is which will come out in June, is the Open edition, where every article is some research about something to do with the Open. Sidney Matthew, the specialist on Bobby Jones, is writing a piece about what actually happened to Bobby Jones when he famously has been reported, it has been reported that he walked off the course and
ripped up a scorecard, yeah?
Yeah, ripped up a scorecard, exactly. So Sid's writing the actual truth of that event, what actually really happened, because he didn't walk off the course. He played his round out and came back the next day and asked could he play again. But he said it was his greatest failure on the links, that moment when he tore up his card. So it'd be lovely to get the inside of that. And then there's lots more little nuggets about past Opens,
Sure. And if people are interested out there and so inclined, how would one go about joining the British Golf Collectors Society?
Yeah, you just go to golfcollectors.co.uk, go to membership, and then just fill in a form and send it to the secretary. It's as simple as that, really.
It doesn't sound like you bite too much as a collective. Listen, just a couple of quick questions to finish with. In conclusion, I know that you were a graduate or are a graduate of the European Institute of Golf Course Architects course in Edinburgh. We always ask our guests to consider their bucket list entries in terms of golf courses that they either haven't played or perhaps would like to get back to. So I'm going to put you under pressure now, Roger, and ask you what's on your bucket list.
So courses?
Courses, yeah.
Augusta.
Uh-huh.
I want to go back to European because I just thought that was one of the best courses I'd ever played.
Pat will be very pleased.
Exactly. Can I have my driver back?
As a complete aside, I actually had lunch with Nick Edmond yesterday from Global Golf for Cancer.
Yeah.
And he's actually down in the European today, hanging his flag on the fourth hole in the European.
Wow. And honestly, it was just, I played it with my brother's brother-in-law, Joe Darcy, and Ray Darcy's brother, for any of the Irish that are listening. And it was just the most amazing course, and I was like spellbound. And then Pat was there in the clubhouse afterwards as well, So I was able to chat to him, and like, do you know what you've done? It's just like, that was so beautiful, So glorious course. So yeah, definitely the European. Royal County Down, which I played lots in my youth, but I haven't played for over 20 years. I just want to go back,
Do you ever get used to those blind shots, Roger?
Do you know what? I think blind shots is the purest form of golf. I know it sounds weird.
I don't disagree with you, but I'm just asking for those that don't like blindness out there.
Yeah, because when you're playing a blind golf shot, it's just you and the ball. And there's no outside influence. You just have to sit and breathe and take your shot and use your imagination, which is so crucial for good golfers like Seve and stuff. Imagination was everything. But with normal golf, it's like people are looking at their GPSs and just use your imagination. I just, growing up, in Lurgan, they had like 50-yard markers and 100-yard markers down the right-hand side of the fairway. But other than that, you just eyeball them. So I think blind holes, absolutely, like, you get to use your brain, which I think we're sort of taken out of the game a bit, And also GPSs should be illegal from less than 60 yards. I can't with a GPS, thinking it's 43.5 yards, should be dragged out and shot, Not literally,
No, literally.
Take up ice skating or something, just do something else. But, there's nothing worse. I played a round of golf with Joe Mace, who you might know. But and there was a group, and it was like that scene from Caddyshack, with Rodney Dangerfield when he's on the fairway and he's playing the music, let's dance. And it was like that. And it took 3 hours for 9 holes, And
oh dear.
I'm just like, my God, you lose the will to live, So I love it. In St. Andrews, we play ready golf and keep the game moving. And in the winter months, we get around in under 3 hours. Admittedly, it's like the end of the Benny Hill show, but it's fast and it keeps on moving. It just
without the music, hopefully.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it keeps the game moving, and it's fast, and you get home at a reasonable hour. You're able to get work done and stuff like that, as well as had your game of golf. 5-hour games are just excruciating.
They're painful, absolutely. So we've got we have Augusta, we have the European, we have Royal County Down. Until I brought you off on a tangent, so sorry about that. Number 4 would be
Pebble Beach.
Okay.
I'm tired of saying that Crail golf course is like Pebble Beach, because you play across the water in Crail, and Crail I I love the Balcomie course in Cray. I judge courses by how you feel after the golf.
Uh-huh.
At Creole, you come back in, have lunch, and you just want to go out and play again. Glorious course. But the way you play over the water is described very like Pebble Beach. But I'd like to go and play at Pebble Beach rather than playing something that's a wee bit like it. So
Okay.
Definitely Pebble Beach, and I don't think where else. But actually, Royal Liverpool. I played it once with Hickory clubs, and that was like one of the best games of golf I've ever played, but also one of the worst games of golf that I've ever played. And by that I mean, because I was using Hickory clubs that I'd just borrowed, my relationship with the direction of the ball flight was a distant cousin. It was no, how I was swinging and how the ball was traveling were two different channels.
Uh-huh.
But the course itself is historic, and the clubhouse is amazing. So I'd love to go back there with my own clubs and play that course. Okay. It has a special aura about it. So I am going back in May for the AGM for the British Golf Collectors Society is at Royal Liverpool. So
okay, fantastic.
Yeah, so hopefully I'll do better than the last time, where my first shot went, and I'm exaggerating here to try to build it up, but it went at least 3 inches, but not much further. I'll probably close to 2, because I basically took a swing and the club went right over the ball.
Okay.
But to be fair, it moved in the right direction, so I kind of think maybe I gave my playing partner the line, nearly 260 yards away.
Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully with your own bats next time, you'll do yourself a little bit prouder. I'm sure you will. Listen, I would be remiss of me not to touch on book recommendations with you. Golf books, obviously. What 2 books would you recommend if somebody was thinking about adding to their golf library?
The first one is Tom Morris, The Colossus of Golf. And you can buy it in various formats. You can buy it sort of in an FI format quite cheaply, or you can buy like a limited edition for I think £100 or something from Fine Golf Books. But it's just glorious. And Doc Malcolm, who sadly died around the time when I was researching Footsteps, or even before that, sorry. But when I was researching, and I really wanted to speak to him, and I'd heard he was ill, and I didn't want to go and bother him and stuff. But that book, the way he tells history is just fantastic, because it's not boring. It's not, he makes it human, which is what I'm trying to do with Allan's book. Is that if I get too bogged down in detail, then I'm going to lose the storyline. Uh-huh. So absolutely read that. It is, you could open it up anywhere and take off, and you'd have a good read. It's not something you have to read from start to finish, or from beginning to end. You could pick it up anywhere, read that, and it is just phenomenal. Tom Morris brought to life all the other heroes as well. There's a great chapter in Allan Robertson. The second choice, there's so many going through my head right now. Stephen Proctor.
You can pick 3 if you want. I'm not going to hold you to a hard 2. If you've got 2 or 3 more, happy days, far away.
So Stephen Proctor's book on Tommy Morris is brilliant. I'm so looking forward to his book that's coming out now. His new one.
Sounds great. Yeah. Sounds really good.
He is just a phenomenal writer. When people talk about Bernard Darwin being one of the best writers, I think Stephen Proctor is that for our generation.
It's the old newspaper writer, he really brings the story to life.
Yeah, honestly, he really does, but not in a glib way, not in a sensationalist way. Just tells the heart of the story, which I absolutely love. So definitely recommend that. There's a book called Golf Scotland's Game by David Hamilton. Now, David Hamilton lives here in St. Andrews, and he's the godfather to so many writers, including myself. He was the one that helped me with Footsteps and helped me get over the line. But he's done that with umpteen writers, So he is our sort of godfather. But his book, Golf, Scotland's Game, basically sets out the case why golf originated in Scotland. It's not a Dutch import, and he's very vociferous about this, that it is definitely Scotland's game. So those three books I definitely recommend. There's tons of books from the 1800s that I'd recommend as well. Andrew Kirkcaldy's, try to get your hands on that. That is just brilliant. It's like because he was a well-known player in the 1800s and 1900s, and he brings all their stories to life. About Jamie Anderson and those early golfers, and talking about champions that going to an event on the back of a cart. It's sort of hard to get your head around that this Open champion would be sitting on the back of a cart as they're driving to Carnoustie or somewhere. It's just so Andrew Kirkcaldy's 50 years, I think it's called, years of, that's definitely worth a read. And then finally, and obviously I could go on all day, Balfour's book as well on St. Andrews links gives detail on the evolution of the links, just to show how it evolves and stuff. And he talks about a massive bunker being beside the steps, where the steps are of the R&A, and I haven't read that anywhere. Uh-huh. On the 18th green, I haven't read that anywhere apart from in this one book by Balfour. These sort of history books are my world. So I could go on for a very long time.
I get that. Listen, before we let you go, you might just tell listeners how they might go about buying any or all of your books, and how they might find you online or on the social channels.
Fine Golf Books stock all my books. I used to look after all the sort of shipping them and stuff like that, but I'd reached the point where I just want to write, really. So Peter Grunwell, he's a lovely guy, lives in town now, stocks all the books. So it's Fine Golf Books is the place to find it. If anybody wants to get in touch, I do have a website, so rogermcstravick.com. And feel free to, if there's any follow-up questions, to get in touch. I'm quite happy to field questions.
Roger, many thanks for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. Let's not leave it 14 years until our next conversation. Continued success in the writing and the editing front. And many thanks once again for your time.
No, joy. Absolute joy. Thank you very much.
Many thanks to Roger once again for his time. Just a quick reminder, you can find us online at firmandfast.golf and on Twitter at firmandfastgolf. Until the next time, happy golfing.